Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, gazing out the window. Beyond the glass, everything was a dull gray, as if someone had erased all the color from the city. Snow fell in heavy flakes, yet she barely noticed. Her mind was an empty void. Her hands rested limp on her lap, as lifeless as a doll's, and she looked just like that doll. Broken, discarded. Scattered across the floor were bills marked with bold red stamps reading overdue and payment reminder. In the kitchen, an empty kettle and a couple of grimy mugs told a silent story of neglect, and inside her soul, chaos reigned. "How did I end up here?" she whispered, staring at her reflection in the window pane. There was no answer, only her own tired, extinguished gaze. Once upon a time she had dreams. There had been a family, a home filled with cozy curtains and the delightful aroma of weekend pies. A husband who wrapped his arms around her shoulders and reassured her, "Sophia, everything will be all right." A son whose laughter was so bright it made her heart skip a beat. And now nothing remained. Her husband had left 2 years ago. One evening, without warning, he had simply said, "Sophia, I can't do this anymore. You're suffocating me with your depression. I've met someone else." She hadn't screamed or wept. She had just sat there in silence, staring at him and thinking, is this some kind of joke? But it wasn't a joke. He had packed his things and walked out. A month later he took their son, Evan, with him. The court ruled that his conditions were better. Conditions? What conditions? He had a good job and a new wife with a smile that stretched from ear to ear. Sophia was left alone in what had once been their home, a home that had to be sold to cover the debts from the divorce. Now she lived in a tiny rented room with peeling walls and an old sofa that creaked with every movement. Work? She'd been fired 6 months ago due to downsizing. She had tried to find something new, but who hires a 40-year-old woman with no recent work experience? For 20 years she had been a homemaker, cooking hearty stews, ironing shirts, and now none of that mattered. Money ran out quickly. She sold all her valuables, jewelry, appliances, even her grandmother's set of dishes ended up for a pittance on some online ad. And so here she sat, alone, penniless, without family, without hope. "Is this the end, or is there still something left?" she whispered to herself. But once again there was no answer. In the half-light of her rented room, Sophia clutched the telephone. The dial tone dragged on endlessly, almost mocking her. "The subscriber is temporarily unavailable." Again and again the same message. For the 3rd day in a row she had been trying to reach her son. Evan had never been one to ignore her calls. He'd always answered, briefly, perhaps curtly, but he always answered. Now there was only silence. "What's going on, Evan?" she murmured, looking at his photograph on an old dresser. In the picture he was smiling, a freckled boy with eyes that sparkled with laughter. What had become of him? What was happening to him? Fear crept in quietly, like a thief in the night. Fear for Evan, fear for her future, fear of the black hole that her life had become. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Sophia jumped. Who could it be? She wasn't expecting anyone. "Who's there?" she called, not taking her eyes off the door. "It's me, Emily. Please, open up." Emily, her only friend, the one who always said, "Sophia, hang in there. Things will get better." Yet nothing had seemed to improve. Sophia opened the door. Emily stood there, pale, with wide, frightened eyes. "Sophia, I need to tell you something," Emily said softly. A chill ran through Sophia's body. Something was terribly wrong. Something bad had happened. "What is it, Emily? Just say it." Emily took a deep breath and blurted out, "Sam is gone. He died in a car accident last night." The world around Sophia flipped. Sam. Gone? The very Sam who had betrayed her, who had left her and taken their son, the same man she once loved more than life itself. This can't be true," she whispered, gripping the wall for support. "I know, Sophia, I know it hurts, but that's not all." Emily fell silent for a moment, as if afraid to continue. "What else, Emily? What else could possibly happen?" "Yvonne, they took him to the hospital. He suffered a concussion and he broke his arm. He was in the car with Sam." Sophia felt the ground slip away beneath her. "Evan? In the hospital?" I have to see him, she managed to say, each word a struggle. I'll take you, Emily said, taking her by the arm. But Sophia, be prepared. Evan might not be happy to see you. Sophia looked at her friend in disbelief. Not happy? He's her son. What do you mean? After Sam's death, his new wife, she told Evan that it's all your fault, that if you hadn't left Sam, he'd still be alive. Her mind swirled in chaos. Her husband's death, the hospital, Evan blaming her for everything. It was a blow. No, that's not true, she whispered, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. Sophia knew she had to be strong now. For Evan, she needed to prove to him that she loved him, that she would always be there, even if he hated her now. But how could she? How could she find the strength when it seemed that everything was lost? That question lingered unanswered as they drove to the hospital. Outside the car, the snow continued to fall, erasing the traces of a life that once was. The hospital reeked of antiseptic and despair. Sophia walked down the corridor in a daze, barely noticing the doctors, nurses, or other visitors. The only thought pulsing in her head was, Evan, my son. Emily stopped at the door of a patient's room and whispered, I'll wait here. Sophia nodded and stepped inside. There, Evan lay in a bed, pale and exhausted. A bandage wrapped his head, and his arm was encased in a cast. He stared out the window, seemingly unaware of his mother's presence. Sophia approached him softly and said, Evan, sweetheart, how are you? Evan flinched and slowly turned his head toward her. In his eyes there was no joy, no love, only hatred? What are you doing here? He asked coldly. Sophia froze as if struck. I came to see you, to check on you. I'm fine, just go away. Evan, what are you saying? I'm your mother. Your mother? He scoffed bitterly. My mother abandoned us. She left for another man. Because of you, Dad died. If you hadn't left him, he'd still be here. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, threatening to choke her as she tried to speak, to defend herself, to explain, but the words stuck in her throat. That's not true, Evan. I loved your father. I never wanted him to die. Lies? Evan exploded, tears mixing with anger. Get out. I don't want to see you. A nurse hurried into the room. Young man, please calm down. You mustn't upset him. She glared at Sophia. You'd better leave. Look at how upset you've made him. Sophia left the room, feeling utterly humiliated. In the corridor, Emily waited for her. So what now? Emily asked cautiously. Sophia shook her head, unable to form words. Tears streamed down her cheeks, burning her skin with each drop. Let's go, Sophia. Let's go home. They exited the hospital and got into the car. Sophia stared out the window at the passing houses, trees, and faces of people living their own lives, while her own had crumbled in an instant. What am I supposed to do, Emily? She whispered. How can I prove to him that I love him? How can I win him back? Emily sighed and said, It won't be easy, Sophia. You need time, and you have to show him through your actions that you've changed. Changed? What do I need to change? You need to become strong, independent. You need to find yourself, and then maybe Evan will see that you're a different Sophia. Sophia considered Emily's words. Strong, independent, find herself? She had long forgotten what that felt like. She had lived only for her husband and son, and now they were gone. Where do I begin, Emily? Where do I start a new life? Emily smiled warmly. Start small, find a job, rent a room, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Gratitude shone in Sophia's eyes as she looked at her friend. Emily was right. It was time to stop pitying herself and to take action. Thank you, Emmeline, she said softly. You've always been there for me. What else could I do? Emily replied with a smile. We're friends, after all. Sophia sighed and gazed out the window. The snow continued to fall, but now it didn't seem so bleak. A small spark of hope kindled in her heart, the hope that she could change everything, that a new life was within reach. Sophia found work as a janitor in a small office building. The job was hard and poorly paid, but it was better than nothing. Night after night she scrubbed floors, dusted desks, all the while dreaming of the day she could finally rent even a tiny room of her own. One day, while finishing her shift in the director's office, she noticed a photograph on his desk. The photo showed a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a little girl sitting on his lap. The little girl's face struck a familiar chord in Sophia's heart. "Excuse me," a voice said from behind her. She turned. A man who had been in the photo entered the office. "I thought nobody was here." "I'm just finishing up," Sophia replied, lowering her gaze. She felt awkward being caught staring at someone else's photograph. "Please don't leave," the man said. "I need your help." Sophia looked at him, puzzled. What help could an office director possibly need from a janitor? "The thing is, my daughter stopped speaking after her mother died. She was only 5 when it happened. Ever since, she's been silent. I've tried everything, doctors, therapists, nothing seems to work." Listening intently, Sophia felt every word resonate. She knew all too well what it was like to lose someone dear, to feel that searing pain. "I notice that she always watches you when you clean here. She probably likes the way you work. Could you try talking to her?" Sophia hesitated. What could she possibly say to a little girl who had endured such a tragedy? "I don't know. I'm not good at talking to children." "Just try, please. I'm begging you." And Sophia agreed, feeling that she owed it to the little girl to offer some comfort. The next day she arrived at the office earlier than usual. The man had brought his daughter in. The little girl sat on a worn-out sofa in the waiting area, staring blankly at the floor. Sophia approached and sat beside her. "Hi there," she said softly. "My name is Sophia. What's your name?" The girl remained silent. Sophia sighed and reached into her pocket, pulling out a small stuffed bear, a plush toy she had rescued from a dumpster. She always carried it as a little talisman. "This is my friend," she said, offering the bear. "His name's Teddy. He loves to play." The little girl slowly lifted her eyes and looked at Teddy. Then, hesitantly, she reached out and took him. "Thank you," she whispered. Sophia felt her heart skip a beat. The girl had spoken. "What's your name?" Sophia asked again, gently. "Molly," the girl replied quietly. Sophia smiled warmly. "It's so nice to meet you, Molly. Would you like to play with Teddy?" Molly nodded. For the rest of the evening, Sophia and Molly played together. They talked, laughed, and even drew pictures. For a while, Sophia forgot all her troubles. She felt happier than she had in years. That night, Sophia realized she had found her calling. She wanted to help children who had suffered losses, to give them love and hope. After several months of working as a janitor and volunteering at a children's center, Sophia began to feel ready for something more. She enrolled in retraining courses and earned a qualification as a social worker. Now, she could officially help children in tough situations. One day, she received a call from the hospital. "Hello, Sophia. This is from the pediatric ward. We have a boy. He needs the help of a social worker." Listening to the boy's story, Sophia felt her heart tighten. He had lost his parents in a car accident and was now alone in the world. "I'll be there," she said without hesitation. She entered his room and saw a young boy lying in bed, a striking resemblance to the child she once knew as Evan. "Hi there," she said softly. "I'm Sophia, your social worker." The boy looked at her silently. Sophia spent several hours with him, telling stories, playing games, simply being there. Suddenly, the boy began to cry. "I want my mom," he sobbed. Sophia embraced him and whispered, "I know it hurts, but you're not alone. I'll be here with you." From that day on, Sophia visited him often in the hospital. She became his friend, his surrogate mother, his family. One day, Evan arrived at the hospital. He'd learned that Sophia was now working as a social worker, helping children who'd lost their parents. He approached her quietly and said, "Mom, I was wrong. You're not to blame for Dad's death. It was an accident." Sophia looked into his eyes and saw remorse and love. "I know, Evan," she said gently. "Everything's going to be okay." Evan hugged her and wept. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was such a fool." "I forgive you, my son." They spent the entire day together, walking in the park, talking, reminiscing about the past. Sophia felt her heart fill with happiness. She had regained her son. That evening, Evan said, "Mom, I want you to live with me. I have a spacious apartment. There's plenty of room for both of us." Sophia looked at him and smiled. "Thank you, Evan. I'll think about it." As she looked around, she realized she had found her new home. A home where she was loved, where she was needed, in her son's heart. But could she really leave those who needed her so much behind? Sophia stood before a choice: return to her son's apartment and the family she had longed for, or remain at the children's center where she was so essential. Her heart ached with the decision. Evan awaited her decision, full of hope and worry. He had changed, grown up, and recognized his mistakes. Now he understood how much Sophia meant to him. "Mom, I know you want to help those children," he said one day, "but you're needed here with me, too. I want you to be by my side." Sophia looked at her son and saw in his eyes sincere love and longing. But she also remembered the faces of the children at the center, their sad eyes, their outstretched hands. They needed her too. After long contemplation, Sophia made her decision. She explained to Evan that she couldn't abandon the children. It was her calling, her new life. Evan understood. He knew that Sophia was a strong, independent woman who always followed her heart. "I'll visit you, Mom," he said. "We'll spend time together, but I know you have to do what you believe is right." Sophia smiled and embraced him. Pride and gratitude filled her heart. He had become a true man. Sophia stayed at the children's center, continuing to offer love and hope. She became a mother, a friend, a mentor to them. One day a little girl, Molly, the one with whom it all began, arrived at the center accompanied by her mother. "This is Sophia, she's my best friend," the girl announced. Sophia looked at Molly and felt her heart warm. She realized that her life had not been in vain. She had helped so many children, restored their faith in themselves and in the future. That evening, Sophia sat in her small room, looking out the window. The stars shone brightly in the night sky. She felt happier than she ever had. She had lost everything, but in doing so, she found so much more. A new path, her true calling, her new family. And maybe, just maybe, she would even find love again. After all, they say life truly begins at 40. Then a knock sounded at the door. Standing on the threshold was a man holding a bouquet of flowers. "Sophia, I know this is unexpected," he said, "but I'd like to invite you to dinner." Sophia looked at him and smiled. "I'll think about it," she replied. And as she closed the door behind her, she knew that her life was only just beginning. Who could tell what awaited her around the next bend? In her eyes, hope shimmered.